create an object of our preference. So let's say we created a box that's, let's say, 50 by 35 by 70 centimeters. And we're quite satisfied with the way it looks, but we want to create copies of this box for whatever reason. Let's say that we like this element a lot and we want to copy it several times to use it in our scene. There's one very easy way to create copies of any specific object. So first off, let's rename this object as original, just so that we know what we're talking about when we're working. So in order to create a copy of our object, one method to do so is to use the shift and drag method. So how that works is I'm going to go into the select and move tool by pressing the W key on our keyboard. I'm going to hover over the X axis, hold down shift, and move our object. As you can see, when I'm moving, I'm actually creating a duplicate, a copy of our object. When I let go, it's going to open the clone options window, which is going to ask whether I want to create a copy, an instance, or a reference. For now, I just want to create a copy, and I'm just going to rename it from original to copy. Now we created two totally separate objects, which can be edited independently of one another, but that have the same length, width, and height. Another option that we can use, instead of creating a copy, is to create an instance or a reference. For the purposes of this demonstration, an instance and a reference work pretty much the same, but when we go into working with modifiers, we'll see that there is a difference between how an instance and a reference work. But for now, let's just go and perform the shift drag copy option again by selecting the original, pressing W to go into the select and move tool, hold down shift and drag right along the x-axis. But this time, instead of creating a copy, we're going to create an instance, and I'm going to rename it instance. So now we have our original in the middle, copy to the left, and instance to the right. We're just going to change their colors so that we can distinguish them. So the original is going to remain the same. The copy, we can change its ID color to blue, and we can change the instance ID color to green. So original, copy, instance. So what is the difference between creating a copy and creating an instance of an object? Well, copy is a totally separate entity from our original, which means at the point of creation, they're basically the same, but if we change any of the parameters in the parameters section of our modify tab, if we change one, it's not going to affect the other in the same way. So if we change the length, width, and height to, let's say, 80 by 20 by 50 centimeters, it's going to change the parameters for my copy, but not for the original. It's not the same with creating an instance though, but let's just show how that works in practice. If we go into the instance object and change its length parameter from 50 to any other value, you can see that the original is changing as well. So we change the width, we change the height for our instance, and the original is changing as well. Likewise, if we go into the original and change the length, width, or height, the instance is going to change as well. This is particularly good if we want to create copies of a specific object that we want to remain the same even if we change our first instance, our original. But what happens if after a certain period of time we want to create an independent version of this? So as it's set up right now with the original and the instance, changing each one is going to change the other. Perhaps at one point we don't want that to occur any longer. That's quite easy to fix. So I'm just going to select either the original or the instance. In this case, I'm going to select the instance. I'm just going to click on this Make Unique button. Now these two are no longer tied together, and I can change the parameters of one without changing the parameters of the other. Box modeling is a technique in 3D modeling where we use a primitive shape as a basis from which we're going to create a more complex final model. The name can be misleading because we don't necessarily need to use the box primitive shape as a basis for our object. We can use any primitive shape that we like, so we can use a box, a cone, a sphere, a tube, or whatever is most suitable according to the final result that we want to produce. For the purposes of this demonstration, we are, however, going to use the box as the basis of our model. So I'm going to create a new box in my perspective view, and for the beginning, I'm going to set its length, width, and height to be 100 centimeters. If we look at our Modify panel, while our box is selected, we can see that there's not much that we can do to modify it. There are a couple of things that we can edit. So we can edit the length, width, and height of our box, and we can add more segments to it if we wish. But it's still going to remain a very simple box, which is definitely not complex enough for us to achieve all of the objects that we want, such as tables, chairs, or whatever we want to create using the box as the base. Now, one thing we can do is add segments for our length, width, and height. What does that actually mean? Well, I can ramp up these numbers from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I'm actually not seeing any changes in my viewport. And the reason for that is that our viewport currently has the default shading turned on, but what we want to turn on is the Edged Faces mode. You can access the Edged Faces mode by pressing F4 on your keyboard. Now when you press F4, not only do you see your model, but you can also see the edges of all of the polygons on our model, and now we can actually see the differences between a box that is only 1 by 1 by 1, which basically means that each side only has one polygon. However, if we want to create a more complex object, it's a good idea to start with having more polygons per side so that we can edit our object more easily. With the Edged Faces turned on inside our perspective view, we can raise the number of segments for the length, width, and height so that we have more control over how we can edit our box that we're going to use as the base for our model. We can type in any number that we wish. I typed in 4, but you can type in 8. If at any point you want to bring the number down, you can just type in a lower number. You can use these arrows alternatively by clicking on them and going up or down. And if you want to bring the number all the way back down to 1, you can just right click on these arrows next to the length, width, and height segments field, and it's going to return to the default number of 1. However, I'm going to leave this at the number of 8 segments for the length, width, and height.